Hey everyone, it's Renee from Sweet Pea Labs here, giving you a video preview of the parts of a plant digital interactive notebook product. So here I'm going to have open both files that you'll receive in the product, which would be a student version of the notebook slides and a teacher version of the notebook slides. And I'll explain quickly what the difference is as we go along. So here in the student version of the notebook slides, you can see it's a Google slide deck here. And so students will start out with a cover page that just says parts of a plant. They'll have a little welcome message here explaining what they're going to be doing in their digital interactive notebook. And also explaining that if they need help, they can refer to the Google Slides tips page that I have here. And then we dive right in. So we've got parts of a plant, a little diagram here explaining the 4 different parts of the plant that we're going to cover. Starting out with the roots, talking about roots that grow above, below, and in water. Also, roots we eat. Each of the parts of the plants, I've referred to plants that we eat as well, because that's kind of fun to make that connection for kids. So different roots that we eat here. And then we go into the first interactive portion, which is a root sort, sorting where these roots grow or if they're roots that we eat. So you can see here the pictures are easily movable. And so we would just move these right over: below ground, above ground, below ground, and then roots that we eat. So it's important to point out to students that they can look for the crosshairs. You can see the crosshairs as they hover over an image, but they get the hang of it. Next slide would be, what do the roots do? And you can see here by this diagram that roots are carrying nutrients and water up into the stems, into the leaves for use for food. And then a quick roots review here. Describe what a root is, what are 2 things roots do, and name something that surprised you about roots. And here it's really easy for students to type inside this text box. Let me move this down here. All right, for stems, we're talking about what exactly stems do in supporting the leaves and the flowers and fruit of a plant. Helping carry those nutrients and water up into the leaves. And then talking about 2 different types of stems. We've got woody stems and herbaceous stems. Showing examples of woody stems here, and then the difference between herbaceous stems here, and also stems that we eat. Okay. We have a stem sort here where students will slide or drag stems into their proper category. We've got woody stems, herbaceous stems, and stems we eat. So all things that were just previously mentioned and shown, and they can refer to those pictures as well. A quick stems review, typing their responses in the boxes, a good assessment for teachers as well. Describing what a stem is, what are 2 things stems do, and then name something that surprised you about a stem. Moving on to leaves. We're talking about how leaves are where the plant makes food and energy through photosynthesis. Also talking about 2 different types of leaves. We've got simple and compound leaves, showing an example here of what a simple leaf is and a compound leaf. And then a leaf sort. Oops, I forgot leaves we eat. Super important, right? Then we move into our leaf sort. So I'm dragging and dropping the simple leaves, the compound leaves, and the leaves that we eat. Moving on to this little story here about getting into photosynthesis, talking about what do you do when you are hungry? I get something to eat. What does a plant do when it gets hungry? It makes its own food, and that opens up the discussion here about photosynthesis and what that might be. And here talking about how photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. And then explaining each part individually. So water gets absorbed by the roots, which is cool because we just learned about roots. And then carbon dioxide gets absorbed by the plant in the leaves. And I keep this really simple. This is elementary education version of it. So photosynthesis can be pretty cool and complex, but broken it down into really easy steps here. So then we bring in sunlight, getting absorbed by the leaves in special cells. And then the plant's ready to make food, and showing how that works here. So we've got sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and it creates sugar, which is the food for the plant. And also, as it goes through that process, it releases oxygen into the air. And so we've got a little interactive portion here about photosynthesis, and the students can drag and drop the pieces that are needed for each part of photosynthesis, and then they have the equation here. So sunlight plus water plus carbon dioxide equals. Then we've got an opportunity for students to arrange the pictures to show how photosynthesis works. I've given a bunch of options of pictures. They can easily slide this bar at the bottom to see all of the pictures. And then they type in the text box here an explanation of how photosynthesis works. And they can change the size and shape of things too if they want to. Showing cool facts about leaves, talking about deciduous leaves, talking about evergreen, talking a little bit about chlorophyll and why things turn colors in the fall, carnivorous plants like Venus flytrap, and then succulents and how they store water in their leaves. A quick leaves review here, talking about the important functions of leaves, simple and compound leaves, and then 2 things that surprise them. And then moving on to the last part, which would be flowers. Talking about all the many ways that we would use flowers, like for decoration, special occasions, and that we also eat them for food. And so here are a few examples of flowers that we might be eating for food. Diving into the parts of a flower, again, keeping this simple and elementary level. So just separating the flower into the male and female part. And then digging in a little bit deeper there, showing what the male part is the stamen, which is the anther and the filament, and that the anther is where the pollen is created. Showing that on a real flower, which I think is really important. Pointing arrows to the stamen here on real flower images. Then moving into the pistil, the female part, and only separating that out into the stigma, the style, and the ovary, those 3 different parts, and explaining briefly here what happens in each part of that female part of the flower. Showing the pistil on real flower pics here because they look very different and they don't all look like the diagram. And then using that for the students to sort of show what they know about the pistil and the stamen and what they look like, using the red arrows to point to the pistil in each picture. Again, those arrows just move. Look for the crosshairs and the arrows will move around. And then the blue arrows going to the stamen in each picture. With the parts of a flower here, we're talking about pollen being moved from the stamen to the pistil, and that's called pollination. And then here, talking about when the pollen goes down into the ovaries, then seeds form, which will eventually make a new plant. And then thinking about how in the world does the pollen get from the stamen to the pistil, and then that's introducing pollinators, which are pollen helpers, and they help pollen move to the pistil so that the flower can make seeds. Here's an opportunity for students to use a safe Google search. And so they're going to insert 3 pictures of pollinators using the insert image and the search the web feature, and typing in the word pollinators or any other names of pollinators that they might think of, and putting those images here inside the box. Touching on petals now that we've talked about pollinators, because as we know, petals have different colors and shapes and they help attract the pollinators. And also talking about sepals, the little leaf-like structures here that protected the flower when it was a bud. And then noticing that there are all different sizes and shapes of the petals of flowers here. So a bunch of real images here of flowers as well. Here's an example of an assessment where students get to create their own flower, and they'll be dragging and dropping these pieces of a flower. They can resize them, they can turn them, who knows what they'll do, but that's part of the fun. And then dragging these labels, these are all draggable, and then dragging the labels to label the parts of the flower once they've built their flower. They should be already layered appropriately, so students won't have to worry about layering to make sure one thing's on top of the other in an appropriate fashion that's already set up. And then a flower review. So the most important function of flowers, describing how pollination occurs, and then 2 things that surprise them about flowers. Talking about you are on your way to becoming a plant expert. And then a quick assessment overview, right? So dragging the parts of a plant to label the plant here. So stem, roots, leaves, and flower. And then this is dragging the arrows to match the function or the purpose of this part of the plant. So what supports the leaves and the flowers, I would drag this to the stem. What makes food and energy for the plant, I would drag that to the leaves. And then at the end of their notebook, it says, congratulations, you are now a plant expert. And so that's the student version and what the students will see. The teacher version has quite a bit more in it, more for you to view. I've got tips and tricks here talking about how it's important when you're sharing through Google Classroom to make a copy for each student so they each have their own notebook to work on. I've included here, this is a video that I've made. It's a tutorial of using Digital Interactive Notebook, and it goes over for students all of the tools in the toolbar for Google Slides, the basic tools that they might be using in a Sweet Pea Labs Digital Interactive Notebook. And that's something that students would just need to watch once. And I only included it in the teacher version, but you could copy it and put it out there for students to view as well in their slide deck. Completely up to you. Then you can see the student welcome, and you also have the Google Slides tips. And some of the other things that you will have would be answers. So in the teacher deck, of course, you have the answers to the root sort. You've got the answers to the stem sort, answers to the leaf sort, and then again, more answer keys. So I've included answer keys everywhere that I could. Some of the answers, as you know, or the things that students build will look different. And I didn't include a specific answer key for those because it just depends on what the students and their creativity build. So here's the answer key for dragging to the stamen and the pistil. And then when they build their flower, it should look something like this, something similar. And then the final assessments here. Right? So you don't really have to think about it too much. You can just look at the answer key, be like, yep, they're good. All right. And then at the bottom here, I got some of my flower clip art from this artist here. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that artist for you. All right. So this is a pretty large notebook. And it can be used in a unit, a thematic unit about plants. And there's some really cool project-based learning things that could be connected to this that I will put out there eventually as well. Alrighty, enjoy.